Hello everyone and happy Tuesday. I'm back because this week is Animal Rights Week, and most of you that know me know that I care a lot about animal rights, and I've done several events to help animals get those rights and raise money for their habitats and things like that. But as soon as I made my notes a while ago, and as soon as I sat down to read it, I'm thinking about everything that's going on, and it just makes me so sad because in the definition of animal rights, it says that it is the idea in which some or all non-human animals are entitled to the possession of their own existence, and that their most basic interests, such as the need to avoid suffering, should be afforded the same consideration as similar interests of human beings. And I'm thinking, if you took out a couple of words and changed it around, it would be exactly what we're living right now, where Indigenous people, Black people, people of color are fighting for their right to their most basic interests, the need to avoid suffering, and that they should be afforded the same consideration and similar interests as the rest of humanity. And that makes me really sad. And I've done another video on that, but I do want to talk about animals today. I'm going to try to reel it back a little bit. So I'm going to give you a little bit of like a brief history. I know there's a lot more to animal rights, and we can't really go over the whole thing about shark finning in China and overfishing and things like that, but these are just the basic high points. So in 1966, the Animal Welfare Act became law, and it doesn't cover every type of animal used in every type of activity. So it doesn't cover farm animals used for food or fiber, cold-blooded species like amphibians and reptiles, horses not used for research purposes, fish, invertebrates like crustaceans and insects, birds, rats of the genus Rattus, and mice of the genus Mus that are bred for use in research. And birds other than those bred for research are covered under the Animal Welfare Act, but the regulatory standards have not been established. So all those groups of animals are not actually protected by law, and it seems absurd at this point in society that we need to do things like protest human rights and LGBTQ rights and BIPOC rights and animal rights, but we're here. In 2018, it was perfectly legal to kill and eat any animal that you own. Our animal cruelty laws protect animals from experiencing unnecessary suffering or distress, but animals have no right to their own lives. In the eyes of the law, they are still considered the property of the humans that own them. In late of last year, most of you know I did a big post about it, that the BSL law got passed on to the next stage, and we were supposed to hear about it in the spring of this year, but with COVID and everything going on, nothing has happened yet, but I look very forward to hearing about that bill. In 2020, the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act, or PAWS, came into force, creating the first fully provincial government-based animal welfare enforcement system in Canada. So Ontario now has the strongest penalties in Canada for people who violate animal welfare laws. And there have been some incidences in Ontario with farms, and I know people in my area have heard about these. There was a couple farms where it was the dead of winter, and people drove by and they noticed that the animals weren't being fed. And obviously this is a really big problem, and people called the SPCA. They couldn't do anything, and it took a really long time for people to take it seriously. But by the time that there were several dead horses on the property, and they had tried to bury some of them so that people wouldn't know what they were doing. But I believe that people ended up being charged for animal cruelty, and I believe with that comes that they're not allowed to own any animals for a little while, a few years. But honestly, people are just going to keep doing it if they were doing it before. And it makes me really, really sad. Each year, more than 100 million animals, including mice, rats, frogs, dogs, cats, birds, hamsters, rabbits, guinea pigs, monkeys, fish, and birds, are killed in U.S. laboratories for biology lessons, medical training, curiosity-driven experimentation, and chemical, drug, food, and cosmetic testing. And I have done another video on lab testing, so if you want to hear more about that, go check that out. But I just want to point out that the majority of the testing, you know what? That's in the other video. I can't rant about that right now. But we are at a stage in humanity where we can pivot and make a really huge change in the way that our humanity lives its life if we decide to stand up for those things. So I love seeing all of the protests that are going on globally for BIPOC, and I love that. I love that. And I know that last year I participated in an animal rights march, and it was so overwhelming, the people walking through. And there's always going to be some people that want to riot and want to do those things, because in our march last summer, we passed by a mall in Toronto, and a lot of the protesters and the people went into the mall and started trying to trash the stores that sold fur, and that reflected very poorly on us, but that is what it is. People will always have different opinions, but I think if we can come together as humans right now, that would make a really big difference for a lot of people and a lot of animals. So that's all I have to say for today. I have done several other videos on animal rights if you want to go check those out. They're older, they're not as up to date, but they do give a little more background about it. Back when, animals were used for transportation and only rich people had, horses, and then you had the farmers that bought and traded their animals so they could afford food, and a lot of them ended up having to sell a lot of their animals just to be able to put food on the table. So we've come a long way, but in a way we haven't really, because a lot of the animals are still suffering in the same way that they used to. But I know that we can do better. And as a society, as we continue to grow, I think COVID is a really big opportunity for that, because everybody's home, they have a little bit more time, and people are starting to care more about these things, and that makes me really happy. I know that in the UK, there are eons ahead of us in terms of veganism and animal rights and things like that. There's even a country, oh boy, I think it's in Europe, that has no homeless dogs, because they adopted the dogs out of all their shelters, and then they rescued all the street dogs and then healed them up. People donated to help pay their vet bills, and then they all got adopted out, and then there was no more street dogs. And that's so amazing to me, that people will put in the effort when it's something that they really care about. So we need to get people to care, and that's what a lot of people are doing right now. If you haven't listened to any BIPOC podcasts, I highly suggest it. There's a lot of really good ones. Jay Shetty has a good one. There's a lot of movies and documentaries on Netflix that you can watch. There's a lot of books you can read and listen to if you prefer audiobooks. There's so many options out there. I have a lot of, not influencers, but people who are trying to make this change, and they sent out an email with a bunch of resources, and I found 3 of the books that one of them was talking about, and I'm going to order them today. But most of them are sold out quite quickly, and they've slashed the prices on some of them, which I don't like, because why should they not get just as much money as, why are they on sale? Yes, it's a big deal, but putting them on sale means less money for the author of the book, so defeats the purpose. But it allows us to learn and grow, and I'm sure I'll share the books with other people so that they can do so as well. But I hope that you're taking the time to think and grow. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your week, and I will see you next week. The end of this week for Instagram Live.